Hello and welcome to today's webinar about Cognigy Knowledge AI. My name is Sebastian Glock and I'm very happy to give you an overview of the latest addition to Cognigy Knowledge AI. And I'm together in this webinar with Thijs Waanders, our consulting director, who will show you some amazing demos and take you behind the scenes of Knowledge AI in the course of this webinar. A quick look at the agenda. We'll start with a high-level view on what Knowledge AI actually is and what use cases it can be applied to. Then we'll show some live demos emphasizing how easy it is to set up and deploy to production. But sometimes, especially for enterprises, easy is not enough. So we will go much deeper into the tooling and show you how to build more powerful applications with Knowledge AI and really max out its potential. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with an outlook on upcoming features and next steps. To kick it off, let's look at the three pillars of conversational AI agents. What is it that an agent needs to handle and to do in order to be successful, for example, in customer service? The first building block is connectivity and orchestration. An agent needs to be able to communicate on various channels with end customers, understand what's going on, and then follow the right processes. The second block is being able to handle transactions, and that means getting things done for an end customer, for example, by accessing a third-party system. But that's not all. In almost all cases, there's a third block, and that is knowledge. It means that an agent should be understanding what a customer is asking for and be able to deliver an accurate and correct response. So they should be able to answer questions based on enterprise knowledge. And as a side note, these building blocks are the same for human agents as well as for AI agents. Both need to connect, both need to be able to do something, and both should know about processes, products, or services. Using AI to give answers is, of course, nothing new, but in the past, capabilities were quite limited. And that's because there used to be two approaches to deal with knowledge. The first one is search-based, and we all know search from our daily experiences as consumers. Search is easy to use and rather easy to set up because it's based on existing knowledge sources. But the results are often inaccurate or generic, and fixing that on the back end can take a lot of effort. The alternative approach that many Cognigy customers have been taking in the past is intent-based or NLU-based knowledge management. The results can be quite accurate here, and that is because NLU has some sort of semantical understanding of a question. But to get that, it needs to be trained, and that makes it very, very hard to scale. Now, I want to look a bit closer and compare these two experiences. Let's look at search first and go with a simple search query. How much does it cost to insure my VW Golf? And the following list is a real example from a very large US-based insurance provider. So here are the answers. The first one is about ATV and UTV. Well, not a really good result because a Golf is neither an ATV nor a UTV. Second, there are generic insurance FAQs. That's not too bad. So that can at least be an entry point for a user to dig deeper, but it also doesn't really answer the question. And here's the third result, a healthy weekend getaway. And that is now completely off topic. It has nothing to do with the initial question, but it's easy to understand where it's coming from because this search experience is keyword-based. It matches keywords from the question with the article, and it doesn't have any idea that golf, the car, and golf, the sports, have nothing to do with each other. So all in all, not really an amazing user experience. Let's compare this to NLU-based knowledge management, which takes a completely different approach. Essentially, this starts with curating the answers. If you did that with Cognigy, for example, you'd create an intent, say request car insurance, and you would then add training sentences like how much is the car insurance, looking for a quote, etc. And with the NLU-based search, if there came in a search query, which is how much does it cost to insure my VW Golf, it would find the best matching intent via NLU. In this case, it found request car insurance with an 87% probability, and that's what's then displayed to the end user. That is a pretty good answer, but you also see that it's very short, and it's typically short because no one would want to maintain, let's say, hundreds of intents for different car brands. And that is what makes it so hard to scale. And that is why it also doesn't deliver the optimal user experience. And that brings up the key question. What if you could combine best of both? What if you put together the best of search and the best of NLU? And that is exactly what we're delivering by introducing Cognigy Knowledge AI, powered by large language models. Let me give you a bit of background why LLMs matter and what role they play in knowledge AI. To do that, I want to introduce the base technology, which is embeddings. And this essentially means that a word is translated into a chain of numbers. And these numbers are represented in a multidimensional vector space, so a complex version of the original word. And that process is sometimes also called vectorization. This is highly simplified here in this diagram, but as you can see, there is a relative proximity between the words Rome and Italy. Well, Rome is the capital of Italy, and of course they are related, but they are not related because somebody added metadata about this or someone configured that manually. They are related because there's a statistical significance between these words based on the millions and millions of documents used in the model's training phase. So this mathematical representation, Rome, is also related to the Colosseum, the Pope, and many other words, well, just like in real life. And now these embeddings don't only work for single words, they work on a much larger scale. And here's another example that I think explains the concept quite well. Let's look at this line. A place where planes take off and land near the Eiffel Tower, and compare that to this line, Charles de Gaulle Airport. For us as humans, this almost feels like a crossword puzzle, like a play with synonyms. But for a computer, it's not so obvious because the words don't match at all. But if we look through the eyes of a computer at the mathematical representation in that vector room, we would find that indeed these two examples are semantically close. And that's really the magic behind this technology. Even though things are on the outside very different, it does what the human mind does. It finds semantic similarity and allows to elevate computer search to a whole new level. So how do we apply that technology in Cognigy? Let's look at knowledge AI and the typical flow of how it works. We start here with knowledge articles, for example, product descriptions. Now, knowledge AI creates the embeddings for those articles. Remember, this is the mathematical representation of the content. That happens once, fully automatically, when those articles are uploaded or changed. Now, when a customer question comes in, we also turn that question into a mathematical representation. And based on that, we can now run what's called the vector search, and we find the relevant article or the most relevant articles, in plural, based on that query. And as a result, we get the answer with the closest semantic relation to the search. That is returned to the user. That is completely independent from how the question is worded, and it's independent from any keywords. That is already much, much better than anything you've seen before with search and NLU. But we don't stop here with Cognigy, but we're taking it one step further, and that is by creating the perfect answer, by once again leveraging LLM technology. In this example, let's look at this very specific search query. My 16-year-old has a level 2 license. Can he drive after midnight in Detroit? Well, very specific. And the answer lives somewhere deep in the knowledge database. So what we do is we take the question, we search the vector database, and we retrieve the best results, just like in the previous slide. But now we are using an LLM to generate the exact answer based on those articles. How do we do that? Well, we send the original question and the results to a large language model together with a prompt, so an instruction. And the prompt could look like this. Answer the following customer question based on the following articles. So we hand everything over to an LLM, and what we get back is the perfect answer that is hyper-personalized to the question. No, your 16-year-old with a level 2 intermediate license in Michigan cannot drive between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. And that probably couldn't be answered any better. So much about the technology. Let's now look at the use cases of knowledge AI. Here, I'd like to systematically cluster examples in 2 dimensions, from customer acquisition to customer loyalty, and from improved services to increased revenue. Here's an example from the top left quadrant. When is the clinic open tomorrow? We're open between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. every Friday. That is a solution that makes a lot of sense, for example, on a website or to automate messenger communication. It's super fast, extremely convenient, and no human involvement is needed. And just as a side note, how does knowledge AI that tomorrow is Friday? We'll come back to that a little bit later in the webinar. For existing customers, knowledge AI dialogue could look like this. The light bar of my printer pulses white. What does that mean? White light indicates that the printer is turning on and off or updating. Such a solution can save a lot of services tickets, and it provides instant support for anyone who has an urgent request. Plus, you, as the owner of Knowledge AI, get all the data. You can use that to gain customer insights or even create an early warning system when certain topics appear more often than they should. So in this case, maybe there's something wrong with the update and you can do something about it. Now, customer acquisition is not just about information, it's also about conversion. So if an inquiry comes in like this, does your homeowner's insurance cover jewelry? We can combine the answer with a call to action. We already know what the prospect is interested in, so we can tailor the checkout experience to the initial request and make it easy to buy. And last but not least, there is upsell to existing customers. If someone comes in with a question about baggage policy, we can combine the answer with information from the customer record and not just reply to the question, but we can also anticipate the next best action. And in this case, this would be adding a checked bag to the booking. So again, we're combining a great service experience with a CTA that has a measurable impact. And as you can see, Knowledge AI has applications in all verticals. It is a completely industry agnostic solution. And our pilot customers have already used Knowledge AI to build applications in transportation, insurance, healthcare, banking, and some others. And if you also want to build an application with Knowledge AI, the good news is you can start right after the webinar. Knowledge AI is available on our free trial environment. You can simply go to trial.cognigy.ai and create an account. You upload your knowledge data, and then you're ready to chat with your own Knowledge AI bot. And with that, I'm now happy to hand it over to Thijs for a few demos and a look behind the scenes of Knowledge AI. So Thijs, please kick it off.
All right, thanks, Sebastian. That's a great explanation. Now let's have a look at an actual demo of this. So I have a Cognigy web chat and I have a PDF file. We have a use case here. It's called Cognigy Airlines, and the Cognigy Airline Assistant here in the web chat can answer questions about the document that we see on the left. This document is about transporting animals. So it's about the requirements that are there if you want to bring your cat or your dog on the plane. There's a maximum weight. There's pricing. There's the carrying container size. All of that's part of this document. So we went through the process that was just explained by Sebastian, and I want to show you what the end result is. And then we have a look at the Cognigy user interface and how you set something like this up. So let's try it out. I have a dog, right? And I have a question about bringing my dog into the cabin. So let's try it out. Hey, so can I bring my dog, Phoebe, the cabin with me? She weighs, let's say, 6 kilograms, and it's very nice. So I ask a question, and you see, yes, there's an answer, right? So you can bring your dog Phoebe in the cabin with you as long as she's in a carrying container and does not weigh more than 8 kilograms. And you see that this is information from the document. So we have the vector search, it finds this document, and it does the question answering using LLMs, in this case GPT, to come up with an exact answer to my question. Let's try a couple of things. If another dog, if I take my other dog in the cargo hold, how much does that cost? Because there was pricing information in there. Let's have a look. So it says the price of taking your other dog in the cargo hold depends on the route and the size of the carrying container, and it's charged per flight direction. So you see this is all part here. Yep. It's charged again for return flights and stopovers. So this is all correct. And there's specific pricing information here as well, and this is related to transfers. So let's try that out as well. And if I transfer via Zurich, and let's see if it can actually find that answer as well. So you see it has to think for a little bit, and then it comes up with the exact amount, Swiss franc, and Swiss francs and euros, as you can see here, which is fantastic. So this is the end experience, and it works quite well. So let's now have a look at how this works in Cognigy. I will switch to a Cognigy project that I created. And what you see here is that we have resources to the left, build, and under build, there's a new resource called knowledge. If we click on knowledge, we see this beautiful widget here, or this beautiful wizard, I should say, with 4 widgets in total, right? The first step is defining a knowledge store. The knowledge store is where we store the information. And in this case, it's an airline FAQ, so let's call it airline FAQ. It asked me to configure a LLM, so large language model for the embeddings, and it also tells me that there's one configured already. I actually went ahead and did that beforehand. If we would not have done that, you would see 2 buttons here, and we can either pick Azure OpenAI or the OpenAI Ada 2 model, and we would have to simply enter our credentials for that, our API key and resource names, and then it's all hooked up. Let's go to the next step. This is where we see this is where we do the actual file upload. So you see there's a type file, and you see that we support PDF, TXTs or text files, and docx, so Word files. So let's go ahead and take the file that we just had a look at, the animal travel or the animal transportation policy. Let's just upload it here, drop it in. You see it reads the PDF file, and then I'll click on next. And then what it now asks us to do, or what it, this is an optional step. What it offers to do is to have a question answering, a question extraction step on top of it. This is what we saw before, where it answers an exact question. So it does not just find the relevant article, it also answers the question that the user had in the context of the conversation. And it has a flow that it can create. It offers to create a flow to put all of that together. So let's do that as well. And then we click next. And then what it will do is we'll set up everything up, and then it will open the interaction panel automatically so that we can try it out. So let's try it out. Hey, can I bring my dog on the plane if it weighs, let's say 5 kilograms? Question mark, and it says yes, right? So this is again based on the document that we just uploaded. And this is how simple it is. This is how quickly you can get going with Cognigy Knowledge AI. And what we just saw changes the game. It changes the way you build bots, right? It changes the way you build conversational experiences on chat and voice, because this is a lot faster to configure than intents. We don't have to hand train everything anymore from scratch. There's also the superior user experience. You saw that the answer that was provided was exactly in line with the way the question was asked, right? So the user asked a yes/no question, can I bring my dog on the plane? And using the large language model, we were able to phrase it in the context of that question and say, well, yes, you are allowed to bring your dog Phoebe on the plane. And this leads to hyper-personalized dynamic answers. And then lastly, this of course leads to an improved deflection. So you'll see actual impact in the contact center, right? Because customers will be happier. Their questions are finally addressed. They don't have to read through everything themselves. And this of course leads to higher self-service rates in the contact center. And again, it truly is a game changer in that regard. There is a but, however. We see that this approach and a lot of these approaches on the market are great when it comes to a couple of documents, right? But if you want to do it on an enterprise level, which means that you have many documents, you have very long documents, you maybe have custom file formats, you need more control. And Cognigy has always been about having an incredible ease of use combined with a lot of control. So what we want to do is we want to go beyond the black box. We want to have a look under the hood as to what needs to come together to build an experience like this. So let's start with the knowledge AI pipeline. We've had a look at what we call the runtime execution. It's finding the right article, it's extracting the answer based on that article, and it's outputting the answer. Before that, we created a knowledge store, and within that knowledge store, we created a knowledge source, which was the PDF document. What Cognigy does is it takes that PDF document and it then extracts the text so it understands the PDF file format. It can do the same thing with docx, and there's more file formats coming in the future. And it can then take these texts and it can create chunks, so generate smaller segments out of the longer text. These chunks are then displayed in the user interface. We can if we want, go ahead and actually change them. So we can change them by hand. And we can even add metadata, so we can enrich those chunks as well. And after we're done with that, and again, this is an optional step, as you just saw in the demo, we don't have to do this. Cognigy can do all of this automatically. But after we're done with that, Cognigy sends those chunks and it sends them to the embeddings model and then stores them in the vector database. And all of this is part of the platform. So we created a Cognigy specific feature for every step of this pipeline. The first one is the knowledge store. We already had a look at the knowledge store. A knowledge store is essentially a database collection. Could be on warranty questions, could be on shipping information, maybe you have a collection on billing, or maybe you have a larger collection that contains more information. Every knowledge store contains one or more knowledge sources. A knowledge source could be the PDF document that we saw, but it could also be a Word document, or at a later stage, will not be part of the beta, we will support website crawling. So you can point it to a website and you can automatically ingest all of the content of a specific web page. Then Cognigy goes ahead and chunks these sources into smaller parts. And each part can then have its own metadata. The great thing is that you then have the ability to take a chunk and to edit it. So you can go in and you can change the text. And once you do that, it will be automatically revectorized and it will be stored again in the vector database. And all of this happens really, really fluently. So this is something that takes very little effort and offers a lot of control. But the great thing is that the metadata field that we just mentioned allows for even more customization. So with the metadata field, you could, for example, attach a URL to this chunk. Or you could say, well, whenever this chunk is found, I want to show a video. All of this is possible because this metadata field is a free-form JSON object. But sometimes you need even more control. And for that, we've exposed the full ingestion pipeline. So what we saw so far is that Cognigy took care of every step, right? It took the PDF document, it parsed the PDF document, it chunked the PDF document, and it then allowed you to edit those chunks if you want, and it then sends it to the vector database. The great thing is that Knowledge AI also has an API and a CLI. So what it means is that you could basically take care of the parsing and the chunking yourself and then send it to Cognigy. And you would do that in case you, for example, have a video that you maybe want to transcribe and then you want to take that text and generate chunks out of that and send it to Cognigy. And we're okay with that, right? We can still vectorize it and store it in the vector database. Maybe you have something in Salesforce that you have a specific script for. That's fine as well. We can put it in a vector database so you can use it. And one of the secret weapons that we have here is that we have a file format that we call a Cognigy text or a ctext file that is essentially a markdown file, right? And it has the metadata associated with it. So the metadata that is associated with a specific source and the chunks in that source. So as long as you can parse to that Cognigy ctxt format, which you will be able to, because it's a very simple format, you can essentially send anything you want to Cognigy Knowledge AI, and we'll take care of hosting and vectorizing it, so generating the embeddings and making it part of your Cognigy experience. All right, so let's now have a look at how these features look in the Cognigy user interface. To do that, I will switch back to the project that we were working on, and I will create a new knowledge store, and I will call it Cognigy FAQs. I'll save it, and you see that we don't have a wizard this time, right? Because Cognigy assumes that if you're new to knowledge search, you set up your first store, then it will guide you through the wizard, because there's a couple of things that need to be configured with the embeddings model, with the optional GPT model for answer extraction. But once you've done that, it's quicker and easier to just create a knowledge source like so. And again, we have the option to upload a file. Could be PDF, could be a text, could be docx. You also see that we have URL, so the web crawling, coming soon. And I want to talk a little bit about the ctext file that we just touched upon in the slide. So let's first have a look at the CTEX file, and then we'll upload it here to the user interface. This is a CTEX file, and you see this is on Cognigy FAQs, right? So you see the question here, what is conversational AI? What is a chatbot or a virtual agent? Questions about the Cognigy AI platform. And what you see here is that there's metadata attached. There's an overall metadata section for the document itself, so the CTEX file itself. And then each section also has its own optional metadata. In this case, for example, you see that there's an image attached to this specific section. And of course, these sections correlate. So the reason we're working with the CTEX file is that we make it easier for Knowledge AI to interpret this file, right? So these sections, they correlate with the eventual chunks that will be parsed out of this document and sent to the vector database. So let's upload one and see how that works. So I'll just take the one that we just looked at, and I'll just drop it here, and then I'll hit create and see what happens. So you see that it now uploads the knowledge source, the CTEX file. So you see that there's a task being generated at the top right. And you also see that the chunks counter is increasing. And now it says, okay, I successfully ingested this knowledge source. I can now click on it. And once I do so, you'll see that it shows me the individual chunks. So you see, okay, this is one, this is another one. What is a chatbot? What is a virtual assistant? And we can just go further and further and see all of these chunks here. And you also see this one, for example, plug and play with your contact center ecosystem. This one has an image associated with it as well and a date. And this is then beautifully parsed into the knowledge chunks. Let me go a step back and show you what the PDF looks like that we initially uploaded in the airline FAQ. So it's the same principle. You see this PDF also has chunks that were automatically generated, but you'll find that these chunks, even though they work quite well, right, they might not be optimal. Right? So this is an automated chunking. You see this one is rather small, so what we could do is we'd actually go in and select text from a chunk, and then we can simply cut it out and paste it in another chunk, and then it becomes part of that chunk, right? So this is very easy to work with. I can also add another empty chunk, right? Or I can add a new chunk in between two existing chunks. And I can just enter some text here, right? So I have the ability to just go in and edit these chunks, remove them, add new ones, as I see fit. And again, this is the PDF that was automatically parsed and automatically chunked. If we take the CTEX file that we worked with, right, you see that the chunking is a little nicer because we essentially help Knowledge AI using the CTEX file format. So last but not least, let's have a look at how to tie this to a Cognigy flow. So how do we actually output this? So if we go back to the flows, you see that the initial demo that I showed, where I uploaded PDF and we went through the wizard, did all of this automatically, right? One of the last steps was Cognigy asking us whether it should generate a flow for us. And that's what it did. We said yes. And what it did behind the scenes is it created this flow automatically, and it also added this node, the search and extract and output node. Cannot be clearer with a node description than this, right? Because it does exactly what it says. It searches, it extracts an answer, and it outputs that answer. And these are the default settings that it used, and I just want to quickly walk you through those. You see that there's search settings that we have, and the top K slider here, this essentially determines how many knowledge chunks we want Knowledge AI to return. And the extract settings are also interesting. This is essentially the GPT prompt that we expose here. And it says, well, the documents are the found documents, right? So the three chunks that we want, the three top ranking chunks that we get from the vector search. And then we see that we have a full prompt. The reason this is a longer prompt is because, of course, we want to prevent hallucination, right? We want to make sure that it answers concisely, truthfully, etc. Right? So we have access to this full prompt as well. And another interesting aspect is that the default output setting is that of text, but we can also switch it to an adaptive card. This is an interesting approach as well. So let's do one more thing. Let's go back to knowledge. Let's go to the Cognigy FAQ store that we have, and let's create a new source. And this time we pick the manual knowledge store. And we can actually create one using the sane node, or create one about the sane node and a specific section in the sane node that I find very interesting, and that is the ability to generate an adaptive card with generative AI directly from within Cognigy. So I just copy this section here, I go back, and I call it generating adaptive card. I create a empty chunk, an empty source, and I can now create a chunk. And what I'll do is I'll just leave it as such, but there's one thing that I will do as well, that is I will add some metadata here. So I will add a URL, and the URL should point to not just this article, but a specific section within the article. Right? So this is how you go about creating a chunk from scratch. So this is now stored, and I will just leave it as this. I will go back to the flow and have a new flow that I just created. And this flow now needs the same node that we have. So we need a search, extract an output node, and then the only thing I need to do is point it to the knowledge store. And again, this happens automatically if you use the wizard. I'm showing you how to do it, how to configure it if you want to have more control. And one thing I want to change here is the output setting, because I want Cognigy to use an adaptive card. And we hit save. And I will now open a web chat widget. I will refresh it, and I will ask a question that will hopefully return that knowledge chunk. So I will say, can Cognigy also generate an adaptive card using generative AI? And let's see what happens. So it finds the article and it outputs the answer, so yes, no question. And you see it has the full article here, right? This is the chunk basically. And then we have a button as well. And this button is automatically generated because we specified a URL in the metadata of that chunk. And that's how it comes together, right? It's the answer that we have here. It's the knowledge chunk, so essentially the article source that we have here, and then we can use further metadata to add further interactivity, like a button that then opens that article. It's very easy to set up. All we need is a chunk and a search node to make this work.
Thank you so much, Thijs. I think it is super impressive how far we at Cognigy have taken knowledge AI already and how flexible and powerful this technology is. I'd like to highlight a few aspects about its enterprise readiness, which really makes it stand out from other offerings. The first one is traceability and control. You can granularly decide if you want to run it fully on autopilot, like in the second demo, or manually optimize it behind the scenes. Unlike, for example, ChatGPT, you also always know where the knowledge is coming from, and you can tweak those sources or expose them to your end users. Also, production and scalability is a differentiator. We've seen the inbuilt document ingestion and parsing, but there's also full support for custom extraction. So you can extend that knowledge AI pipeline with your tools and processes to deliver the best results. And as always at Cognigy, we've also taken load into consideration, and we'll make sure that knowledge AI works with high data volumes at peak times. Data security and privacy is next. And this is deeply rooted in our Cognigy DNA. We host all the data securely for you, and we give you all the control to decide what to do with your data and how to share it. You can process every piece of data before it is sent to your chosen LLM and, for example, proactively remove PII data from your customer input to treat it safely. But that's not all. We're also going way beyond knowledge answering, for example, by combining knowledge bots with transactional experiences. And this is really important. Knowledge AI can be used together with every other Cognigy AI component. And that means it is part of the whole enterprise conversational AI platform. You can use it on voice and text and on any digital channel. You can connect it to business systems and weave data into the answer generation. You can, of course, also use Cognigy Insights to look at analytics data or build an X app with Knowledge AI. It is not an isolated point solution, but part of the conversational digital ecosystem. And let's take natural language understanding as an example. NLU does not become obsolete with Knowledge AI. And here's a great example of why that matters. Imagine you build a knowledge store with information about your shop, and then someone comes and asks, "Are you open tomorrow?" Now, the knowledge store could have all the information about days and opening hours and bank holidays, but there's still a problem. It doesn't know what day it is tomorrow or even today. For Cognigy and NLU, that is not a problem. It can easily detect the term tomorrow and help Knowledge AI answer the actual question. And there are many, many more examples that show why it is so business critical to embed Knowledge AI into your existing stack. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Thijs for another round of demos to show you how you can max out the impact of Knowledge AI within your conversational AI ecosystem. Thijs, take it off.
All right, let's do one more demo and see how we can bring more of that Cognigy ecosystem together. So what I did is I created a flow, or actually I extended the flow. And the flow searches through the FAQ, the airline FAQ that we already created. It will output an answer if it finds an article and it can find and it finds an answer. And if the chunk has metadata and the metadata is called action, then I actually want to look up that action and continue a specific flow whenever that action was found. Why would I want to do that? Well, let me show you. If I go back to my knowledge store, and I go to my airline FAQ, you look at the chunk that I created that is about rebooking a flight, you see that this has a lot of policy information, right? So it depends on whether the flight is canceled. If it's not canceled, right, then I might be eligible for free rebooking, right, but only up until 5 days before the flight. If it's a domestic flight, and up until 12 days in advance if it's an international flight. And this is a typical knowledge chunk, right? This is, I guess, the limitation of knowledge search in general, vector search in general, is that it will output an answer, but the real answer obviously depends on your circumstances, right? So, and that's what search is just not so good at, not even advanced knowledge AI search. So what we really want to do is we want to combine both worlds. So I wanted to give, well, first off, I wanted to find this chunk using knowledge AI, and it will do that most likely, right? Because it works really well. And then I want it to give a general answer. And then I wanted to offer to actually verify and check whether I'm eligible or not, right? And I do that by adding metadata, and in this case, adding an action. This is not a predefined thing. I just call it action, right? And I said, well, this chunk has an action called flight rebooking. And then the only thing I just need to do is I need to make sure that in my flow, the flow that we just looked at, that this corresponds to an actual action in the flow. So how does this work? Well, let me show you. I'll refresh the chat here and I'll say, hey, so I want to rebook my flight. Does this cost money? Right? So I ask the question, and then it says, well, it depends. And this, of course, is typical knowledge search, right? It doesn't have an answer. It cannot give me a complete answer yet because, well, it really does depend. This is just a policy. This is the knowledge chunk. But because I attached an action to this knowledge chunk, I can actually trigger a regular Cognigy flow, right? So now it offers me proactively to check whether I'm eligible for the free flight rebooking. So it says, sure, that would be nice. Let's do that. Right? It says, okay, now please provide me your last name and your booking code. And this, of course, is Cognigy in action, right? You have all of the rich media, all of the channel output. You can create beautiful transactions, beautiful conversations. So my last name is Vanders, and my booking code is AX00212. So I can submit this. And then it says, okay, I'm looking up your flight, and it found my flight, right? So this is my flight from San Francisco to Amsterdam. And it actually takes place on August 10th, right? And it takes place in less than 5 days, so you're not eligible for a free rebooking. But the fact that it could actually check this out for me and attach transactions, so something useful to a knowledge article, of course, is really, really cool. And want to show you one more thing, because what we can also do is we can also do something before the search takes place. So what I did is I added a regular GPT prompt, right? We have a GPT or an LLM prompt node. And what I basically says, okay, please summarize the text into one sentence, right? And then what I want to do is I want to store that and call it prompt result, right? And then instead of searching for whatever the user types, I want to essentially pre-process that input, right? And search for the outcome of that. So why would you want to do that? Well, imagine you detect that the thing that the person is asking for, imagine you detect that it's a very, very, very long text, right? So it could be something like, let me actually try it out. Hey, so this is this dice, and yeah, I am headed back for Holland because I am attending a wedding, and yeah, so I found an earlier flight and was wondering if I can just pick an earlier flight like so, right? And we can make it quite exotic. So yeah, can you rebook my flight, or does this cost money, right? This is a very large input, and even for knowledge AI, this can lead to results that are just not optimal, right? So what we can do is we have a GPT prompt, right, that sits in front of that, and the GPT prompt, right, essentially simplifies the query that we then send to knowledge AI and then the rest of the flow triggers. And as you can see here, despite my very, very long input, it still manages to find the right knowledge chunk, the right article, and it starts the process as we've seen before. So anything you can do with a Cognigy flow, any of the channel outputs, any of the transactional features that we have, all of that is possible and all of that can be combined with knowledge AI.
Thanks again, Thijs. Even though we've already shown a lot in this webinar, of course, we couldn't include everything into this session. And one aspect we didn't speak about was knowledge AI in the context of agent assist. Just note that everything you saw today is not only available for end customers, it can also be made available for your agents. So you can use knowledge AI in your 8x8, Genesis, Avaya, or other contact center environment. And you can use Cognigy to listen into human-to-human conversations and surface knowledge articles on the fly. Or you can use it to create dynamic, personalized, suggested replies, like in the example here. So you have a human in the loop before any answer is given to an end customer. And all of this will be subject of a dedicated session in the future. Speaking of the future, where are we going next? Let me mention some of the planned features that will enhance knowledge AI even further. One topic are knowledge connectors. Many of you have existing knowledge repositories in tools like Salesforce, Zendesk, or maybe in their contact management system. Today, you can connect to these by customizing the ingestion pipeline. And in the future, we want to make this even easier through ready-made connectors. Another area is knowledge editing. Today, anything is possible through the combination of chunks and metadata, but it can be made easier. Instead of adding a flow via JSON, you could, for example, simply select it in a UI. So editing will be made a lot easier and faster. Then we plan to allow more flexibility in regards of the LLM models. Today we use OpenAI and Azure OpenAI for the embeddings, but there are other candidates like Aleph Alpha or Cohere we plan to pre-integrate. Another major item here is allowing a local LLM so that in the future, no more data needs to be shared externally to make knowledge AI work. And last not least, AI-supported model optimization. If you're familiar with Cognigy's NLU, you might know the intent analyzer. That is a very simple traffic light system that allows anyone to optimize the performance of their NLU model with AI feedback. And we plan to roll out similar features for knowledge AI so that even the largest knowledge repositories can be more easily orchestrated and optimized. Now coming back to the hands-on. As mentioned earlier, Cognigy Knowledge AI is available on our trial environment for all users. If you don't have an account yet, please create one, even if you usually work on your own Cognigy server. You'll be able to test everything with your own documents and build agents such as the ones that Thijs showed in the demo. A few notes before you kick it off. The number of total document uploads and queries is limited, and that is only a restriction in the trial, and that won't apply to our customers, of course. The document parsing will be further enhanced in the next releases, so the chunking might change as you run your tests. And finally, note that the knowledge stores are not yet part of snapshots, so they currently cannot be exported from trial. If you try it out, note that you will see an option to share your feedback. Please make use of that and help us take Knowledge AI together to the next level. And with that, we're at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much for attending and see you next time.